They thought I'd give up the land my family had built over 3 generations, just because a bunch of rich newcomers wanted to turn it into a golf course. Laughable. What's truly surprising is how a land transfer document appeared with a signature I never made. But they had no idea they were messing with a former NASA electrical engineer. This is the story of how I turned 20 acres into an impenetrable fortress, and the electric fence was just the beginning. It was a perfectly ordinary Tuesday morning when my quiet life imploded. I was enjoying my coffee on the front porch of my farmhouse, watching the sun rise over the eastern fields. The same fields my grandfather had once plowed with horses, my father had modernized with his first tractor, and I had maintained after retiring from NASA. The ranch wasn't much by Texas standards, just 20 acres of decent land with a modest house, a barn, space for a few horses, and my workshop. But it was mine, or so I thought, until the mail arrived. Among the usual bills and junk mail was an official-looking envelope from something called Meadow Vista Estates Homeowners Association. I almost tossed it since I'd never joined any HOA, but something about it made me open it. The contents made me spill my coffee. According to this letter, my property was now part of the newly established Meadow Vista Estates development, and 15 of my 20 acres had been designated as community land for a planned golf course and recreation area. Even more shocking, they included a photocopy of a document with my signature agreeing to the transfer. A signature I had never provided. This has to be some kind of mistake, I muttered, studying the paper. The signature resembled mine, but not exactly. It was missing the slight tremor I'd developed in recent years, subtle but impossible to fake without knowing. I called my neighbor Miguel, the only person I trusted since I moved back to run the ranch after my wife passed away 5 years ago. "Bob, it's happening to everyone on this side of town," Miguel said. His voice was tense. "Harrington Enterprises, the development company, they've been buying up all the small farms. And the ones they can't buy? Well, looks like they found another way." By noon, I was standing in the reception area of a gleaming office building built where the old Thompson farm used to sit. The door bore a sleek plaque, Meadow Vista Estates HOA. The receptionist's smile faded when I slapped the letter on her desk. "I need to speak with whoever's in charge of this nonsense," I said, keeping my voice level but firm. Minutes later, I was in the office of a woman in her mid-40s, sitting behind a modern desk. The nameplate read, Evelyn Harrington, President. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Mr. Caldwell, I understand you have concerns," she began smoothly. "But I assure you, everything is perfectly legal." She gestured for me to sit. I didn't. Documentation has all been filed with the county. As for your remaining 5 acres, we're prepared to make a very generous offer. She slid a document across the desk, showing a figure that might have seemed impressive to someone who hadn't done their research. But I had. It was less than half the land's worth, especially now that a luxury development was planned. "This is fraud," I said flatly. "I never signed anything, and I'm not selling an inch of my property." Her smile thinned. "Fighting this will only cost you money and time, Mr. Caldwell. The development is happening, with or without your cooperation." That evening, Miguel told me there was an HOA meeting scheduled for 7 p.m. at the new community center, a meeting every member had been notified about, except me. I went anyway. Slipping in quietly at the back, I watched as Evelyn and a sharply dressed lawyer named Andrew Peterson presented elaborate digital renderings of Meadow Vista Estates, luxury homes, a clubhouse and a sprawling golf course, and there it was, my barn and fields, featured as holes 7 and 8. When they opened the floor for questions, I stood. "I'd like to know how you plan to build on land you don't own. I never agreed to any of this." The room turned. Evelyn's mask slipped for just a second before she recovered. "Mr. Caldwell, I'm afraid you weren't invited to this meeting. This is for Meadow Vista Estates members only, which you voluntarily became, remember?" Her emphasis on voluntarily made my blood boil. No one else spoke. As I turned to leave, I caught her expression, calculated, determined, ruthless. If forging signatures was voluntary, They had no idea what I might voluntarily do with my 20 acres. That night, I called my daughter Sarah in Chicago. We hadn't been close since her mother died. My grief had made me distant, but she was the first person I thought to call. "Dad, don't do anything yet," she said after hearing the full story. "I'm coming home. This is straight-up fraud and we need to handle it legally." Sarah had always been the practical one. She chose law over engineering, and by the next evening, she was standing in my doorway, suitcase in one hand, laptop, bag in the other. She dove right into work combing through the documents and county records. "This stinks, Dad," she said, spreading papers across the kitchen table. This HOA was created just 6 months ago and the approvals were rushed through like lightning. These annexations? They're not random. They specifically avoid people with political connections. This is a land grab. The next morning, we walked into Andrew Peterson's law office without an appointment. His receptionist tried to block us, but Sarah flashed her credentials. Suddenly, we were in his corner office. "Mr. Caldwell," he said, pointedly ignoring Sarah. "I understand. You have concerns, but—" Sarah cut him off. "Save it, counselor. We're here about the forged documentation purporting to transfer my father's property rights. We're demanding an immediate retraction." Peterson's face shifted from smug to guarded. He pulled out a file and showed me the document with my supposed signature. "Everything here is notarized and legally filed," he said smoothly. "If Mr. Caldwell doesn't remember signing—" "That signature is forged," Sarah interrupted. "And we're filing for forensic examination. Once that comes back, you'll be looking at criminal charges, not just civil." A flicker of unease crossed his face. "In the meantime," he said coolly, "your father remains subject to HOA regulations, including access to the community land portions. Failure to comply will result in $1,000 daily fines." While Sarah focused on the legal battle, I turned to another lead. Years ago, an old-timer named Dakota Cody Redbird had mentioned that part of my land might have historical significance. I found him living on the nearby reservation. "Bob," he said after I explained the situation, "that corner near your creek? That's part of an old native settlement. Grinding stones, maybe even burial sites." He pulled out an old map. "You get that surveyed, it'll trigger historical preservation laws. They won't be able to build a thing until the state signs off. I'll help you file the paperwork," he added. That same evening, as Sarah and I strategized, a county deputy showed up with an official notice from the mayor's office. According to the letter, I was in violation of HOA rules for restricting access to community areas, and the daily fines would begin immediately. "This is insane," Sarah muttered, reading it again. "They can't enforce rules from a fraudulent organization." But we both knew legal battles take time, and they were trying to bleed me dry with fines in the meantime. After the deputy left, I stood up. "Sarah, keep working the legal angle. I'm handling this my way too." I walked out to my barn workshop and opened cabinets I hadn't touched since retirement. Inside were boxes of components, circuit boards, old NASA notebooks. Sarah appeared in the doorway. "Dad, what are you, planning?" I held up a design notebook. "They think I'm just some old farmer they can push around. They forgot I used to design systems that survived space. Let's see how they like private property boundaries reinforced by aerospace-grade deterrence." The next morning, I checked county ordinances. No regulations prohibited electric fences on private land, so long as proper signage was used. Voltage limits? Only for residential zones. My land was agricultural. I smiled as I sketched the plans. 25 years of electrical engineering were about to pay off. I drove into town for supplies: high-gauge wire, solar panels, deep cycle batteries, motion sensors, and specialized relays. At the agricultural supply store, the clerk raised an eyebrow at my list. "Keeping something dangerous in, Mr. Caldwell?" "No," I replied. "Keeping something dangerous out." Miguel showed up that afternoon with his sons and a truck full of gear. "You sure about this, Bob?" he asked. "Dead sure. They have connections. That's why I need to protect what's mine." We got to work. I wasn't just building a fence. I was building a warning. The design was custom. motion detecting sensors to catch anyone trying to cut or climb it, variable voltage settings, fully legal, but enough to discourage trespassers, surveillance cameras linked to my computer, and Sarah's phone. It took us 3 days. By the third sunset, my 20 acres were no longer just a ranch, they were a fortress. I had just finished installing the final warning sign: private property, electric fence, enter at your own legal and physical risk, when a sleek black SUV pulled into my driveway. Evelyn Harrington stepped out, flanked by 2 men in Meadow, Vista Estates polo shirts. "Mr. Caldwell," she called, her voice oozing with that fake pleasantness that always made my jaw clench. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" I secured the sign and turned to face her. "Protecting my private property, Miss Harrington. Something I'm fully entitled to under state law." She advanced a few steps but stopped at a safe distance from the newly installed electric fence. "This barrier violates multiple HOA aesthetic guidelines. I'm going to have to insist that you remove it immediately." I couldn't help the cold smile that curved my lips. "I'm not part of your HOA, Miss Harrington. Regardless of whatever forged paperwork you may have filed, I am outside your jurisdiction. And even if I weren't, Texas property law allows for reasonable security measures on privately owned land." Her perfectly maintained expression cracked just slightly. "This is an intimidation tactic and a safety hazard. I'm calling the authorities." True to her word, she pulled out her phone. 30 minutes later, Officer Ramirez from the local precinct arrived. He looked visibly uneasy as he surveyed the situation. After inspecting the fence, the permits, and the clearly posted warning signs, he turned to Evelyn. "Ma'am, everything here complies with county regulations. As long as the warning signs are visible and the voltage stays within agricultural limits, Mr. Caldwell is within his rights." Evelyn's face darkened with frustration, though she fought to maintain her composed tone. "Officer, this man is interfering with a legally sanctioned community development. There will be consequences." Ramirez shifted uncomfortably, but his voice remained steady. "Any disputes about property boundaries or legality need to be resolved through the courts. I can't remove a lawful fence from private property." After they left, I returned to my workshop and activated the system. The green indicator lights blinked steadily on the control panel. The entire perimeter was secure. I called Sarah, who was in the city meeting with a forensic document expert. "Phase 1 is complete," I told her. "Let them bring their bulldozers now." The next morning, I awoke to the sound of vehicles near my property line. Through my binoculars, I saw a group of workers in hard hats with surveying equipment setting up just outside the fence. The HOA had clearly sent them to scope out a weakness in my defenses. One of the workers, apparently skeptical of the warning signs, approached the fence with a pair of wire cutters. The moment he touched the line, the fence delivered a controlled jolt. Not dangerous, but strong enough to make him yelp and drop his tools. The alarm system activated instantly. Cameras captured everything as the man backed away, shaking his hand and muttering curses. Within minutes, the crew packed up and, left. That afternoon, I received a formal letter hand-delivered by a representative from the HOA's legal team. It accused me of installing dangerous and aggressive security measures that allegedly threatened public safety and blocked community access. They demanded the fence be removed within 48 hours or face legal action. Sarah drafted a response on her law firm's letterhead. It was short and sharp. "Any attempt to trespass on private property will result in criminal prosecution. All future communication must go through legal counsel." As she sealed the envelope, she looked at me grimly. "The electric fence was just the beginning, wasn't it, Dad?" I nodded, already sketching plans for Phase 2 of our defense. "I spent my career designing systems to protect billion-dollar equipment in space. If Evelyn wants to escalate, I'll show her what secure really means." The HOA's retaliation came fast and from multiple directions. First, they filed a formal lawsuit seeking an injunction against my hazardous security system, calling it a public danger. Second, the mayor, James Wilson, a man whose campaign signs I'd seen all over Harrington-owned properties, held a press conference condemning selfish individuals obstructing community development. He didn't name me, but everyone knew who he meant. Most damaging was a front-page article in the local paper. Its headline screamed, "Stubborn Senior Blocks Children's Park Development." The article portrayed me as a paranoid recluse wielding electrical weapons to intimidate families. It painted Meadow Vista Estates as a wholesome, family-centered project for the betterment of the town. Not one word mentioned the forged paperwork or that the HOA was illegally trying to seize land that had been in my family for generations. "This is a coordinated attack," Sarah said, reading the article with me over breakfast. "They're trying to destroy your public image before we even get to court." She wrote an open letter addressed to every resident within a 5-mile radius. It told the full truth, how my property was being fraudulently claimed, how the HOA had forged signatures, and how the development plan would raise property taxes and drive longtime locals out of their homes. We printed hundreds of copies and spent a full day delivering them to mailboxes. During our rounds, we met Jennifer Williams, a reporter from a small independent paper. She had been quietly investigating Harrington Enterprises for months. "The golf course is just the cover," she told us after interviewing us at the ranch. "What they really want is to rezone this land for commercial use. Hotels, strip malls, big profits." She was skeptical about the forged documents until Sarah showed her the evidence. Preliminary findings from the document examiner, including signature mismatches and alterations. Jennifer's eyes lit up. This could blow the whole thing wide open. Meanwhile, Evelyn wasn't staying idle. She started calling neighbors personally, warning them about the electrical weapons I'd supposedly installed. She implied that I had become mentally unstable since my wife passed away. She told Miguel at a community potluck that I was a danger to public safety. Her plan was clear: paint me as a lunatic to weaken my credibility in court and in the public. As Sarah and our attorney worked to prepare both our defense and a counter-lawsuit for fraud, I remained vigilant. Security camera footage showed frequent drive-bys of my property, but no one dared get close. Then one night, around 2 a.m., I was jolted awake by a security alert on my phone. The night vision cameras revealed 2 figures inspecting my fence. I zoomed in. To my surprise, it was Andrew Peterson, the HOA's lawyer, along with an unidentified man carrying a scanning device. They were measuring and recording details of the fence, clearly hunting for a technical violation to use in court. I didn't confront them. The footage was far more valuable than any argument I could have made in the dark. The following day, I received another notice, this time from the City Utilities Department. They were going to disconnect water and electricity to my property within 72 hours, citing safety concerns about unauthorized electrical systems. Sarah filed for an emergency injunction to block the shutoff, but there was no guarantee it would be granted in time. "They're escalating," I told her, "so we need to accelerate." I had already planned for this. Components for a solar power grid and rainwater collection system had arrived weeks ago. Miguel and I worked around the clock to install solar panels on the barn and workshop roof, feeding into a large battery array. For water, I set up a rainwater capture system with advanced filtration equipment I had originally designed for use in space missions. We finished the installation with just hours to spare before the cutoff. Sarah stood with me as we tested the system. "They're not just trying to beat you, Dad," she said. "They're trying to make you an example." I nodded. "Then we'll make an example of them instead. Not just for us, for every family they've bullied." The ranch was now fully self-sufficient. I smiled as I flipped on the security dashboard. They thought turning off utilities would make me give up. But I'd built life support systems for deep space. No water, no air, no power. Those were just design problems. And now my property had a new feature ready for the next uninvited guests, months away. "The system is designed to wear down individuals fighting against corporations," Sarah explained frustratedly. "They're hoping you'll give up before we get our day in court." One night, around 3 a.m., my phone alert woke me with multiple security breaches. The cameras showed 3 men attempting to disable the electric fence at different points simultaneously, a coordinated attack. As they worked, my defense systems activated in sequence. Floodlights illuminated them like actors on a stage. The sprinkler system drenched them instantly, and the alarm system blared across the quiet night. The men fled, but not before the high-definition cameras captured clear images of their faces. Most surprisingly, I recognized one of them. Mark Johnson, Mayor Wilson's personal assistant. This wasn't just trespassing. This was a politically motivated operation. The next morning, Sarah filed our footage with Officer Ramirez and formally requested a police investigation into the attempted trespassing. She also filed an amended complaint in our civil case, now including evidence of continued harassment and attempted property invasion. As Ramirez reviewed the footage in our kitchen, his professional demeanor cracked slightly. "Mr. Caldwell, Miss Caldwell, this is beyond a simple property dispute now. That's the mayor's assistant." He looked troubled as he continued. "I need to take this up the chain of command. But I should warn you, the chief is golfing buddies with Mayor Wilson." Sarah copied the files to a USB drive and handed it to him anyway. "Then perhaps you should also share this with the county sheriff and the state police. This is now a criminal matter involving public officials." After Ramirez left, I reviewed the footage again, focusing on the mayor's assistant. When Sarah sent me this video, I had to stop and look closely at one of the intruders. It couldn't be, but it was definitely Mayor Wilson's assistant. This wasn't just about a greedy HOA anymore. This was a conspiracy, reaching into the highest levels of city government. Jennifer's investigative instincts proved correct when she uncovered documents revealing that Harrington Enterprises had entered into a confidential agreement with Blue Sky Resort Group, a major casino and hotel development corporation based in Las Vegas. "They're not building a golf course, Bob," she explained, spreading the documents across my kitchen table one evening. "They're planning a massive casino and resort complex. That's why they need your land specifically. Its elevation provides the perfect view of the valley and river that would be the centerpiece of their marketing." This revelation explained the urgency and the increasingly aggressive tactics. Casino development was heavily regulated in our state, and local approval often depended on community support. If residents knew the true nature of the development, there would likely be significant opposition. "There's more," Jennifer continued. "State law prohibits casino development within 5 miles of protected cultural sites." She looked meaningfully at Sarah. "If Cody's application for historical protection is approved, it would legally block the entire development," Sarah finished, a slow smile spreading across her face. "No wonder they're panicking. They're racing against time." The next day, Sarah appeared with Cody before the County Historical Commission to expedite the application for protected status. The preliminary evidence was compelling enough that the commission issued a temporary protection order, pending full review, effectively placing a 90-day hold on any development plans for the area. The HOA's lawyer, Andrew Peterson, requested an urgent meeting with Sarah the following day. They met at a neutral location, a coffee shop in the neighboring town where neither was likely to be recognized. Sarah returned looking both troubled and satisfied. "He offered a deal," she reported. "You keep 10 acres, including the house and barn, plus substantial financial compensation, in exchange for dropping all complaints and keeping quiet about the casino plans." When I asked what she had told him, she smiled. "I told him we'd need to see evidence that they're addressing the claims of all the other landowners they've defrauded. Not just us." Peterson's desperation revealed more than he intended. In his eagerness to salvage the deal, he let slip that the casino project was already behind schedule and over budget due to our resistance, and that major investors were threatening to pull out if the situation wasn't resolved quickly. He also inadvertently confirmed that Mayor Wilson had personally expedited permit approvals in exchange for promises that the development would include facilities bearing his name. A clear ethics violation at minimum, and potentially criminal corruption. Armed with this information, Jennifer prepared what she called her nuclear option article, a comprehensive expose detailing the casino plans, the forged documents, the mayor's involvement, and the coordinated harassment campaign against me and other holdout landowners. The night before publication, she came to the ranch with her editor to review every detail one final time. "Once this hits, there's no going back," her editor warned. "Harrington has enough money to bury our little paper in lawsuits." Jennifer nodded resolutely. We've triple-checked every fact. It's time the public knows the truth. The article hit the streets and online platforms simultaneously the next morning. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Local residents, many of whom had supported the development based on promises of community spaces and increased property values, were outraged to learn about the casino plans. Religious leaders, business owners concerned about the impact on local establishments, and parents worried about having a gambling center near schools all voiced their opposition. By noon, a crowd had gathered outside City Hall, demanding answers from Mayor Wilson. The mayor hastily called a press conference that evening, flanked by Evelyn and several city council members. He categorically denied any impropriety, dismissed Jennifer's article as fake news and character assassination, and vowed to investigate the spread of malicious misinformation. But the damage was done. As he spoke, Evelyn's normally composed expression was strained, her face pale. When a reporter directly asked about the documented meetings between the mayor and Blue Sky Resort executives that had been kept off official calendars, Wilson stumbled in his response, further damaging his credibility. Watching the press conference on TV that evening, I noticed something in Evelyn's demeanor that concerned me. Despite the public relations disaster unfolding, there was a determined, almost predatory gleam in her eyes as she surveyed the reporters. This wasn't the look of someone accepting defeat. It was the expression of someone calculating their final, desperate move. "She's not done," I told Sarah as the press conference concluded. "In fact, I think she's more dangerous now than ever." I was right to be concerned. Within hours of the press conference, our security system detected unusual activity at multiple points around the property. The cameras showed nothing, but the motion sensors were registering movement. Sarah contacted Officer Ramirez, who promised to send a patrol car but warned it might take time due to the chaos downtown following the press conference. "Something's not right," I muttered, reviewing the sensor data. "They're moving in a pattern that avoids camera coverage." Using my knowledge of the system, I recalibrated the cameras remotely to cover the blind spots, just in time to catch a glimpse of black-clad figures with professional-grade equipment, testing our perimeter defenses. "This isn't just trespassing," Sarah said, a note of alarm in her voice. "This looks like a coordinated operation, with professional equipment." I nodded grimly, already moving to activate our emergency protocols. "Call Ramirez again. Tell him we need immediate assistance. Then call Jennifer. Tell her to publish whatever she has right now, no matter how incomplete." As Sarah made the calls, I opened a hidden safe in my workshop and removed a small device I had hoped never to use. My final contingency plan for a worst-case scenario. When I saw that press conference on TV, I noticed something in Evelyn's eyes that wasn't defeat. It was the look of a predator making one final desperate attack. The next morning brought a seismic shift in tactics from our opponents. The HOA suddenly withdrew their lawsuit regarding my electric fence, which initially seemed like a victory, until Sarah received an alert from the court system. "Dad," she said, her voice tense as she read from her laptop. "They've filed in federal court for eminent domain proceedings. They're claiming public necessity requires the expedited acquisition of the land." Before we could fully process this news, Mayor Wilson appeared on local television announcing an emergency executive order designating our entire area as a special development zone, requiring immediate clearing for public safety concerns. Within hours, city trucks and heavy equipment began assembling at the edge of my property. Workers in city uniforms looked uncomfortable but determined as their supervisors directed them to prepare for emergency obstacle removal along the property line. Sarah immediately filed for an emergency restraining order. But we couldn't be sure it would be processed in time. As the bulldozers warmed up their engines, I knew it was time to deploy my last resort. Option 1 I had prepared weeks ago when I first sensed how far our opponents might go. "Sarah," I said calmly as we watched the crews through binoculars, "remember when I disappeared for 3 days last month?" She nodded, still focused on her phone as she tried to reach the judge. "I wasn't just upgrading our security system. I placed several micro cameras and recording devices in the HOA offices and Harrington's corporate headquarters." She looked up sharply. Dad, that's illegal surveillance, I shook my head. Not exactly. I use technology I developed at NASA for monitoring secure spaces. These devices don't record private conversations. They only activate when specific keywords are mentioned in conjunction with my name or property. I opened my laptop and showed her the footage I'd been collecting. Evelyn, Mayor Wilson, and representatives from Blue Sky Resorts, explicitly. Sarah stared in disbelief. This is everything we need. But will it be admissible in court? It doesn't matter, I replied. What matters is that Jennifer publishes it right now. As if on cue, Jennifer called to inform us she was going live with a streaming broadcast outside our property, covering the city's apparent attempt to seize private land by force. I told her to stand by for additional breaking news and sent her the key footage. Within minutes, her crew was broadcasting both the confrontation at our fence line and the damning video evidence of corruption. A split-screen expose watched by thousands. Officer Ramirez arrived just as the first bulldozer rumbled toward our fence, flanked by several patrol cars. And, to our surprise, officers from the county sheriff's department and state police. He approached the city crew supervisor and presented a document. This is a temporary restraining order prohibiting any action against this property pending judicial review, he announced, projecting his voice for Jennifer's cameras. Additionally, I have warrants for the arrest of Mayor James Wilson and Evelyn Harrington on charges of conspiracy, corruption, and fraud. The city workers, many of whom had appeared reluctant from the start, immediately shut down their equipment. As they dispersed, we learned the judge had been shown Jennifer's broadcast footage in real time, prompting immediate legal intervention. The confrontation that had been building for weeks unraveled in minutes, replaced by the surreal image of police officers escorting city officials away from my land, not me from it. Within hours, under intense public scrutiny, the district attorney's office announced a formal investigation into the entire Meadow Vista Estates development process, including allegations of forged documents, corruption, and abuse of power. Mayor Wilson was seen being led from City Hall to a waiting police cruiser, his face ashen. Evelyn was arrested at the HOA office while allegedly attempting to shred documents. But the most unexpected twist came when Andrew Peterson contacted Sarah directly, offering to cooperate with investigators in exchange for leniency. You don't want to trust him, I warned Sarah after she told me about the call. A man who turns that quickly will turn again. I don't trust him, she said thoughtfully. But his information could be valuable. Peterson claimed to have evidence of a much broader land acquisition scheme, not just here, but across 3 neighboring counties. That caught my full attention. If Harrington Enterprises had been replicating this fraud on a larger scale, there could be dozens of families fighting similar battles. Without our resources or the technological edge we had, the preliminary hearing was held just 3 days later. The courtroom was packed to capacity. Sarah, calm and commanding, represented us brilliantly, presenting not just the evidence of forgery and harassment, but linking it to the wider scheme Peterson had revealed. Cody Redbird testified on the historical significance of the land, revealing that many targeted properties had cultural relevance to indigenous communities. This wasn't just about desirable land. It was also about bypassing preservation regulations that would have blocked any development. Evelyn, stripped of her usual polish and confidence, tried shifting all blame to Wilson and her husband, claiming she was just following orders and had no knowledge of the forgeries. Wilson, in contrast, threatened to implicate half the city council if he were prosecuted to the fullest extent, hinting that the corruption ran far deeper than anyone realized. The judge, clearly disgusted by the affair, issued a preliminary ruling in our favor. My property rights were affirmed. The HOA's claims were nullified. Both Evelyn and Wilson were denied bail due to the seriousness of the charges and the clear risk of evidence tampering. As we stepped out of the courthouse into a crowd of reporters, one of them shouted, "Mr. Caldwell, will you be taking down your electric fence now?" I couldn't help but smile. The fence stays. It's a reminder that what's worth having is worth protecting, and that sometimes the best defense is a good electrical engineer. The crowd laughed, and for the first time in weeks I felt the tension begin to lift from my shoulders. The war wasn't over. But we'd won the decisive battle. Peterson's cooperation revealed an operation far bigger than we had imagined. Codenamed Operation Green Valley, it was a coordinated land grab orchestrated by Harrington Enterprises, targeting scenic and resource-rich properties across multiple counties. Dozens of family farms had been earmarked. This wasn't just about a casino, Jennifer said as she reviewed the newly uncovered documents. It was about building a massive resort corridor stretching all the way to the state line. They had established 5 different HOAs across 3 counties, each slowly absorbing private land through forged deeds, legal intimidation, and regulatory manipulation. Cody revealed another chilling fact. Many of the targeted properties sat on land with significant archaeological and cultural value. If those sites had been properly registered, development would have been impossible. Their plan was to destroy evidence before anyone had the chance to document it. Evelyn tried to save herself by throwing her husband under the bus, claiming she was simply following his lead. But her performance crumbled when security footage revealed her shredding documents and Peterson produced emails showing her actively planning the forgery strategy. Wilson, now cornered, barked threats from his holding cell. "If I go down, I'm taking half the city with me." Instead of helping him, his words widened the investigation. More officials were implicated. The court hearings laid out everything. Forensic examiners confirmed dozens of forged signatures. Financial records traced illicit payments to shell companies owned by public officials, and Peterson testified in detail about the planning meetings. When defense attorneys criticized my use of high-tech security, Sarah pivoted. "You're questioning the response, not the cause," she said, laying out the repeated trespassing, harassment, and the mayor's direct involvement. The judge's ruling was absolute. My property rights were formally affirmed. The HOA's actions were deemed unlawful. A compensation fund was established for other landowners impacted by the same scheme. And most significantly, a review of all permits issued during Wilson's administration was ordered. As we stepped outside the courthouse again, another reporter called out, "What will you do with your ranch now?" I looked at Sarah, then at our new allies. "I'm keeping the electric fence, but I might add a gate for those who want to learn the real history of this land." 6 months later, the ranch had become a symbol of resistance. I'd modified the fence, leaving it around most of the property but adding a formal entrance. Sarah decided not to return to Chicago. Instead, she opened a small law practice focused on property rights. "There's more meaningful work here than in corporate law," she told me. "Besides, someone has to keep an eye on the new city council." Cody and I built an educational center on the ranch grounds, a space where visitors could learn about indigenous history. "This is how we stop the past from being erased," Cody said as we installed the first display case. Miguel organized an agricultural cooperative with other farmers, aimed at resisting future development pressures. "We are stronger together than alone," he declared at their first gathering. Jennifer stayed with her local publication, despite offers from national outlets. "Who watches small towns if the serious journalists leave?" she asked. "This is where the real stories are." Ramirez, now promoted to chief of police, introduced new transparency protocols for law enforcement. "What happened to you was possible because too many looked the other way. That doesn't happen on my watch," he told me during one of his visits. The criminal trials ran their course. William Harrington accepted a plea deal, heavy fines, and a 10-year ban from any development work. Evelyn continued to fight the charges but was on the losing end of mounting evidence. Wilson's threats backfired as former allies, seeking to save themselves, lined up to testify against him. The new mayor, a retired schoolteacher, ran on a platform of transparency and rural preservation. She won easily. On the 1-year anniversary of our victory, we held a small gathering at the ranch. Friends, allies, and neighbors filled the barn. As the evening faded and the stars lit up above us, Sarah noticed the small section of electric fence I had intentionally left untouched. "Are you really keeping that?" I nodded. "Just that piece. Not for protection anymore, but as a reminder that important things are worth fighting for, even against impossible odds, and that you Should never underestimate an old man with a ranch, some electronics, and too much free time.